and now going to have to go on Monday. So they re-racked them in just after 1:08 p.m. Eastern Time Monday. Jimmy Johnson led the field of the green, going to skip ahead to Johnson losing the lead. It's the green car, Kyle Busch, who gets out in front. Trouble in turn 2 for Michael Waltrip here.
He did a good job keeping it off the wall. Kept the wheels to the left. Normally they snap back and head straight back into the wall.
Wrinkled up the back end a little bit, but for Michael Waltrip, a tough day at California. Ryan Newman, Daytona 500 winner, tough day.
Bliss over from Daytona.
That looks more like a Darlington stripe. Maybe it's the way he likes it.
Ryan wound up finishing 10th despite that little brush with the wall. Lap 220, the leaders come on to pit road, and Jimmy Johnson comes out with the lead. Thought that might be the key moment of the race. Listen to his team.
Be ready, be ready, be ready. Take it, go, 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 go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chad Knaus was certainly excited about that. But Carl Edwards, who was leading going on to pit road, was not to be denied.
Indeed, the best race car all day long, and ultimately prevailed. He had the car to beat all day long.
Johnson tries the crossover to try and reclaim the lead from Edwards, but Carl just had a little too much to get it done and ended up pulling away over the final laps. This is probably the best racing we saw all day as far as side-by-side stuff is concerned.
It's pretty awesome because Fontana always has good racing because they're the top and the bottom group.
Carl Edwards pulled away in the final laps and took the checkered flag first. Another California victory. Roush Fenway Racing. He takes the checkers under the caution because Dale Jarrett crashed after the white flag had come out. Carl Edwards and Jack Roush celebrating a win. And how does Carl celebrate? Well, of course.
First flip of the year.
So Carl took the lead with 90 to go, gave it up, got it back, gave it up, got it back with 15 to go. And for Edwards, his 8th career NASCAR Sprint Cup Series win.
Huge statement. I mean, just a huge statement, Alan. Last year, the Roush team was a bit reluctant to adapt itself to the new car. They did not believe that NASCAR was as serious as they ultimately were. Saw Hendrick come out and spank everybody. It's obvious that they are now fully on board. Huge win today.
Yeah, and no one really made a big deal out of it. This was the first race for the car tomorrow on a downforce track, and NASCAR is predominantly 1.5 to 2 mile tracks. So I think Roush Racing, Chris Andrews, Robbie Reiser, everyone back there did their homework, and now they're the team to beat right now on these tracks.
Let's hear from the race winner, Carl Edwards.
No matter how you cut it, that was a lot of fun to be able to pass Jimmy, especially with the success that those guys have had lately. It meant a lot to be able to race with them and to beat them today. I have a lot of respect for those guys.
I just was trying to go wherever Jimmy wasn't, and then he went where I wasn't, and I'm lucky he was a little bit loose because that would have been really, really tough to get by him if he wasn't so loose. So we were very fortunate there.
Carl, is today any indication that specifically Roush Fenway or anybody else have caught up with Hendrick with the way they jumped out with the COT last year?
I hope it's an indication that we've caught up with them. They still are. They're second and third. I mean, they were the guys to beat today. I hope this is a sign that we're up to their standards, to their level. I believe we are.
Well, they certainly were on Monday, and they certainly were at California. Look at the Roush Fenway record at the now-named Auto Club Speedway of Southern California, stout.
They might have to rename that track the Roush Fenway track.
There's already a little park named Fenway. We'll keep that one for the Red Sox fans. Thank you very much. But Carl Edwards continuing his racing team's domination at that 2-mile speedway. Talk about the race a little more in detail now. First, by looking into how Carl won the race. He was not the dominant car for much of the day. In fact, he probably ran third for about 2/3 of the race, behind Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon.
But the important thing is he got his car about halfway through the race. He got his car handling really good. And also, there was a lot of work done back at the shop by Chris Andrews and Robbie Reiser. I keep saying it because they've done so much development on their COT car, and it paid big dividends today.
It was interesting to see him come from behind there on that last restart, because what we heard so many times was that he had the car to be on long runs.
Yep.
And yet, with that short run at the end of the race, he was able to get past Jimmy Johnson, whose car was obviously quite loose, and go ahead and win the race.
And he came in with 30 laps to go, and he had a bad pit stop. He was leading when he came in. He went back forth. It would be real easy for a driver to get upset and just, screw up. Yeah, well, he didn't. He kept his head on straight, kept his head down, and got fast. And
put me inside the helmet when you're a driver and you get down pit road and you're leading and you come out third. Are you talking to yourself? Are you venting to the pit crew with the radio button pushed? Or are you just, trying to gather it back in.
I'm sure Carl was venting, whether he had the radio button or not, that's another story, but I'm sure he was yelling, and he just kept his head down. I mean, he wasn't going to be denied today how hard he drove.
That car was just hooked up. I mean, that car was really hooked up. They did a great job preparing that car, and again, last night you heard time and again people talking on the radio as well as on the broadcast that Carl Edwards was the guy, that on long runs he would prevail, and again, very interesting that on a short run he ended up getting it done.
So this, as you mentioned, was the first race on an intermediate speedway for the car of tomorrow, or as we'll call it, the new race car. The 1.5 and 2 mile tracks that make up so much of the NASCAR circuit. How'd it do? Well, a lot of guys had some issues with it in terms of sliding around a lot. We saw a lot of this, right sides kind of getting pancaked.
It turned really well, though. I think one of the biggest issues coming into this race and a big concern was whether or not the car would be able to turn through the corner. Many complaints from many drivers about that heading into this event, and yet it did perform well from a handling standpoint for the most part.
I think for the average civilian, the race still looks the same. It's a great race, but the drivers, they're harder cars to drive, so it's going to showcase the talent of the driver a lot more than the old car.
I love how you call them civilians.
Oh, they're not out there in those suits all hot.
That's right.
The fans. Let's hear what the drivers had to say about the new car's performance on this California track for the first time.
It wasn't bad, you know. I mean, it wasn't that much different than the old car. We you know, just the pace dropped so much, tires go away, and that's kind of what we expected. And we were competitive, so you know, it probably wasn't as good a race as I would have liked to have seen. I thought we'd see a little bit more passing, a little bit more side-by-side racing, so still got some work to do.
It seemed like it affected the downforce less, and when you're following someone, and the drag more, so you could actually gain a little bit being behind someone. It didn't stop you from being able to race with them.
We were getting to the point last night where we were really good, and we started off today and we were really loose off the corner, so it took us probably half the race to get that better. Even at the end, we were still loose off the corners.
I think it was pretty good. It was fun to race. I mean, you were 3 and 4 wide in the corners, so I don't know what it was like for the fans, but from the driver's point of view, it was pretty good because you could go inside or outside. This racetrack's starting to come apart, which is a good thing. I hope they don't fix it, because when racetracks come apart, then there's 2 or 3 grooves, and it makes it more of an opportunity to pass.
Some of the drivers' thoughts on how the new car fared in its first intermediate track race. I'll make a couple statements here. You guys agree or disagree with me, and why? First of all, I'm still optimistic about it. It's the first race on that kind of track. These teams are still getting to figure out how to get these cars to do what they want them to do. And my other sentiment was agreeing with something you said a little while ago, Boris. Didn't look that much different than some of the recent races we've seen on that speedway.
No, I think it's pretty much the same. And you look at Jeff Gordon there, he goes, I had a bad day, you know, and he finishes third. Jeff Gordon had a bad day, he's third. And he blew up on the last lap.
Yeah.
I think one thing that needs to be said, too, is that this is really a true indication of what might be to come, because the Daytona race is, you know, it's its own animal. And this we're going to see throughout the rest of the year. This was really the first place that the season truly gets underway.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it wasn't any worse, and give the team some time to get the feel of this car, and I remain optimistic. So here are the championship standings after the first 2 races of the season. Kyle Busch holds on to the point lead by 6 over Daytona 500 winner Ryan Newman. Carl Edwards with his win slides in 5th position, and Martin Truex currently in 12th. Yes, it's already not too early to be looking at those top 12 as we wind throughout this long season. Just getting started, coming up under the hood. What were the track conditions like at the start of the race? Was it appropriate to be racing at that time? We will talk about it. We will look at some drivers who had great rallies, from early troubles Sunday night to great finishes Monday afternoon. And highlights of Monday's second half of the Twin Bill, the NASCAR Nationwide Series race that Tony Stewart dominated. 11th place there for him. Kurt Busch came back from a lap down to finish 13th. We'll talk more about his rally a little bit later in the show. And Robbie Gordon on the bounce back from the post-Daytona penalties with an 18th place effort on Monday.
There. Whoa, look out, out of control is Casey Mears. Collects Dale Earnhardt Jr. They're crashing behind. Sam Horton Jr. is in it. Now there's fire on the Casey Mears machine.
There is no question it was a rough beginning to 500 miles on Sunday night for some teams, some drivers, the racetrack, the fans, NASCAR. Everybody had it a little rough on Sunday. We continue to look at the Auto Club 500 with Boris Said and Marty Smith. Weather conditions. After being delayed 2 hours by rain, track drying was completed. NASCAR sent the field out onto the racetrack, and it only took 14 laps for one driver to find problems with those conditions. That was Denny Hamlin, wound up finishing well down in the field, 41st place after popping the wall. Hamlin saying he hit some water on the track. Let's talk about that now with Boris and Marty. What's it like when you go out onto a racetrack, you're a driver, you're getting ready to go off into a corner at 205 miles an hour, and you just see those little patches?
Well, you can't really see those little patches at 200 miles an hour. That's what it is. I mean, for an average civilian to understand how much water it takes to spin a car out, a little bit of puddle like that, if you run over it with a racing slick, it actually lifts the car off the ground. So it's not a very good feeling at 180 miles an hour.
Now, Denny Hamlin and Dale Earnhardt Jr. were a little critical of NASCAR's decision to start the race, but not everyone joined that chorus.
Well, Alan, certainly I would have been much more critical of NASCAR for starting that race when they did. Had I not spoken with Jeff Burton this morning before the restart of the race, he told me that the race was just fine when they started the race last night, and he said nobody had any issue with it. But as the race progressed, the track got worse and worse and worse with the seepage, and nobody would stand up and say anything. He said it's up to the drivers to complain to NASCAR so that they know. And as Boris said, Burton also echoed that they had a lot of trouble seeing out of this windshield and finding where the rough places on the racetrack were.
But that's the trouble with drivers. Drivers want to be macho. So the first driver that starts complaining, it's too wet, I don't want to crash, we need to stop the race. You know, they don't want to be that guy. They want to be the tough guy.
Are you that guy?
No, I would have complained right away. But, you know, once Dale Jr. and they all crashed, NASCAR took a look at it and stopped it and did the right thing. But even NASCAR couldn't see that water. It was such a minute amount.
The pressure on the racetrack and on NASCAR to run the race on its scheduled day, it's enormous. Think if you'd shelled out, say, $400 for 4 seats, and you're sitting there knowing you've got to go back and go to work on Monday, and they postponed the race until Monday, and you don't think they waited long enough. It's really enormous pressure on the Speedway and NASCAR to get the race run.
Tremendous pressure, and it's never about the competitors. NASCAR is about the fans. It truly is. It may sound hokey or trite, but it's the facts. Those fans sat out there all day long, 10, 12 hours. They wanted to see Cup racing. NASCAR tried to give it to them. They might have waited too long if you ask some of the Cup guys, but ultimately it was about the fans. They did their best. Ultimately wasn't meant to be last night.
And that waiting around all day led to another problem. There was so much trash on the track, hot dog wrappers, peanut wrappers, just garbage that usually isn't there. We didn't see it today during the race, but led to some big problems in the race with engine cooling.
This is Matt Kenseth, that's Jamie McMurray, all kinds of trash on the racetrack on Sunday night that wound up being a problem with the front end of the new race car. Nice move there by McMurray, by the way, to clear that off. Jeff Gordon even ran into it. We saw several guys with trash on the grill that led to heating problems. We moved over here out of the chairs and behind our Home Depot race car to just take a look at the front end of these new cars and show you what the problem is.
Let me show you a difference between the grill on last year's car and this year's car. Last year's car, the grill opening was this big. It was right on the front. So a pit crew member during a pit stop could reach out with a stick and clean the grill off and get the trash off. But these new cars, to optimize downforce on the front splitter, the grill opening is actually under the front bumper here. So you got to reach in there. You can't do it from the pits. A crew member actually has to get under there, reach in there with his hand, but these braces for the front splitter can get in the way. And it's real easy for a crew guy to get tangled up once the car is leaving, as we saw last night with Tony Stewart. So dangerous job here.
I'm curious if we'll see NASCAR maybe adjust the location of that center brace for the front splitter based on the fact that a crew member does have to reach in there and clean that off by hand.
I don't think you could do that really, because those front braces, you know, those hold the splitter up, and the splitter is responsible for a lot of downforce, so there's actually a lot of pressure on that right there, so they need those braces.
All right, next topic. There was a pattern to this race. It had to do with the location on pit road of last year's series champion, Jimmy Johnson. He had the first slot on pit road in almost every single pit stop. He didn't go in with the lead, but he came out with it.
Indeed he did, and the 48 guys did a great job. They did have some issues on the rear tires at times, but when it all came down to it, they got the job done, did a great job, and that really speaks big to how important qualifying will be moving forward with this new race car. It's very difficult to pass with this car. It puts a premium on pit road activity. Boris, huge.
Yeah, huge. I mean, last year, guys really didn't care where they qualified. They knew they were in the show. But now, with that first pit stall and track position being so important, it means a lot to get the pole, get that first pit stop like Jimmy Johnson did. He gained a lot of track positions with that pit stall today.
He had a chance to win the race at the end, even though he didn't have the fastest car, because he kept coming off of pit road first. It'll be interesting to see one of a couple things. If NASCAR adjusts where that scoring line is at California to try and minimize some of the advantage of that first pit stall, or just how much more important qualifying does become in some of these races going forward.
I think, though, if you get the pole, you deserve a little advantage. That's why you get the pole, to get that good spot.
Well, that valid point.
What about points?
Well, we should get points for qualifying, too.
How many?
Throw that in there. Throw 25 points in for
Whoa!
That's what I want to see.
That's a lot of points,
I want to see those guys go for it during qualifying.
Anything else while you're ordering up a menu? Things? I mean,
yeah, maybe NASCAR could give me an exemption so I get it.
yeah, make sure you're in the Daytona 500, right? All right, when we continue our look at Monday's California action, how some of the big names fared in their Monday matinee.
There's some space in victory lane.
And we continue to look at the Monday results from California and dig a little deeper into the finishing order. Scott Riggs with a 21st place run. Jamie McMurray's team tried a little pit strategy to get him track position. Didn't end up working out. He wound up 22nd on the day. And Michael Waltrip, after troubles on the pace laps on Sunday, came home with a 28th place finish. One of the stories I liked from the Sunday-Monday race were rallies. Guys that had trouble on Sunday that wound up with good finishes Monday. Matt Kenseth was on pit road overheating at lap 11, came back to finish 5th. Kevin Harvick, remember, had troubles just as Denny Hamlin was crashing at lap 14 Sunday. Came back Monday to finish in 8th place. Kyle Busch, when they went back racing from the red flag from the big junior Casey Mears crash on Sunday, the hood was up on his car. He bounced off the wall once on Monday. He came back to finish 4th. And Kurt Busch ran out of gas on Monday at lap 125, went a lap down, came back to finish 13th after starting 36th. Let's hear from some of those drivers.
We were just off, all weekend. Really didn't get enough practice time to figure out what we needed to fix, and just really struggled with it all day. But we had a great day on pit road, and Chip made a lot of good adjustments, and we tried to get it better, and we're able to salvage a good finish.
The track got loose when the sun came out, and we kept trying to tighten our car up, and we didn't get it tight enough. And it was just too loose on the gas. But easily, we had a top 15 car, and we finished 18th. So, we'll take those points and go to the bank. But we definitely are better than that.
And Robbie Gordon could use those points after the points he lost from his Daytona penalty. Rallies, I thought a great theme from the Sunday-Monday race. Anybody's rally that struck you and you said, hey, that was nice?
Absolutely. I think a couple guys, Alan. Brian Vickers and the Red Bull guys, their program is so much better than it was last year. Jay Fry, one of your old buddies, has taken over that program and really made it a lot better. Also, Casey Kane with the Gillette Evernham bunch. He started 20th, finished 9th. They are running so much better. I think Kane will be a player this year.
But what about Kyle Busch? I mean, that guy went to the back. They had the hood up. Came all the way to the back, all the way to the top 5 in about, 20 or 30 laps. I mean, he was just mowing down the field. So he was pretty impressive.
Bounced it off the fence. Yeah. Still finished 4th.
Right. And what about Matt Kenseth? I think he sent a message. He said, I didn't get enough time to practice in my car. My car was terrible. And he still finishes 5th. So when he gets it right, he's going to be trouble.
I think the interesting thing about these races, when you stop and you look at the way they unfold, for teams like Kenseth's and Kyle Busch's and so on Monday, and really any week, there's an example of this. These are long races, and with the free pass rule, never give up. Never give up on getting a good finish, because with that rule, there's always a chance.
I think that's one thing that takes young drivers a while to adapt to the Cup Series is, hey, you have time to settle in. In trucks and in the Nationwide Series, you kind of got to get there now. And in the Cup Series, you do have time to settle in, let your crew work on the race car, and be there at the end, la Matt Kenseth.
Except poor Dale Earnhardt Jr., he had to go to bed Sunday night knowing that I'm 40 laps down. Tomorrow's going to be a miserable day. It's really just a test day. So it was pretty much over for him Sunday night when he got in that big crash.
Yeah, he and Denny Hamlin kind of had to limp around for most of the afternoon on Monday. Let's take a look now at the races for some of the big names, if you will. Jimmy Johnson, two-time defending series champ, started on pole because of points. Had himself a good afternoon, led 76 of the laps in the race, but wound up losing the lead here to Carl Edwards about 15 laps from the finish. Still a solid second-place effort for Jimmy Johnson. Jeff Gordon, same thing, led 68 laps. Very solid race car, but just couldn't stay out in front of Carl Edwards in the late going, and Jeff Gordon wound up finishing 3rd on Monday. And Daytona 500 winner Ryan Newman, not a bad day. He led 3 laps, but he scraped up the wall a time or two, wound up coming up with a 10th place finish at the end of the day.
I just couldn't put the gas down, and I could see him eating away at my lead and coming the whole time. And once he got up beside me, it takes downforce away from the car even more, and I was even more sideways than I was to start with.
I thought we were going to be better during the daytime than we were. We actually weren't as good as I thought we were going to be, so that hurt us a bit. But still, a real solid day. I mean, you know, we were a second, third place car, and that's where we ended up today.
The Autel Samsung Dodge was basically a 10th place car. We brought it home as that, and it could have been a lot worse. It was no better than a 10th place car. So we just look forward to Vegas and keeping working on it.
Thoughts of Johnson, Gordon, and Newman. Hendrick finished second and third with the two cars that were still in the race on Monday. Remember that Earnhardt Jr. and Casey Mears got taken out in the wreck on Sunday night. And as much as everybody wanted to say, maybe wants to say this was a statement race for Roush, hello, Hendrick second and third.
They're just the standard. I mean, they are the standard in the sport right now. Again, last year they won half the races in the sport, and I think 9 of 16 races with the new car last year. They are just so dominant.
But this is the first time we've seen the COT car on a downforce track, on a 2-mile, fairly flat track. And when the COT program started last year, Roush was way behind. But they hired Chris Andrews away from Evernham. I mean, all the work Robbie Reiser does there and all the people at the shop, I mean, I think those engineers were working overtime on their slide rules and computers last year, but Carl Edwards had the dominant car.
And mindset. A lot of that is mindset, because they were so unwilling when NASCAR first introduced the concept of the new car. Hey, we don't believe that's coming. They really never bought in until they saw how great Hendrick was and realized, okay, this thing's here to stay. We have got to step up our program.
And again, even though they didn't get the finishes they were hoping for, I thought at times in the race, both Sunday and Monday, Kurt Busch and Ryan Newman looked fairly solid, so the Penske cars look like they're competitive as well. Coming up, a look at the second half of Monday's twin bill. Tony Stewart smoked the field in the Nationwide.
It's probably about time for my spring feeding.
These guys don't know when TV's listening to their radio, do they? Maybe. Lap 64, Brian Clausen with a vicious crash.
Big.
Thought he had a right rear tire going down, took the wall, full force, head on. Another look ahead as Marcus Ambrose just is able to avoid Clausen's disabled car. The young man okay, but a hard hit for Brian Clausen. The story of the day, that car. Tony Stewart in the 20 car. Led early, led often, and just ran away from the field for much of the afternoon. Stewart chose not to pit late in the race when some others did for fuel, but had enough to get to the finish line. And for Tony Stewart, 2 races, 2 checkered flags in the NASCAR Nationwide Series this year, as Tony Stewart took today's 300-miler in Southern California. 10th NASCAR Nationwide Series win for Joe Gibbs Racing, and Kyle Busch with a strong runner-up finish. First or second in his last 8 starts in the Nationwide Series. That's hard to beat. Mike Massaro was in victory lane with Tony Stewart after the race.
Tony Stewart had one comment for his team. He said, hey guys, let's have fun today. It certainly looked like a lot of fun today. How would you describe that race car?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, it's that was the worst it was at the end there. It was the tightest it had been all day, but I think the caution hurt us there when we had the caution and stayed out. It seemed like the cycle made the balance tight, but this car was awesome today. It was just so fast that all you had to do was just run hard, and if I could stay ahead of the 99 there for about 15 laps, I could just keep running my pace, and those guys would wear their tires out and wear themselves out trying to stay with us, and we could just drive on and go on our own pace after that.
I would imagine after running 324 miles on the Cup side this morning as an opening act, that was probably the best medicine, I would imagine. What was it like today running all those miles?
That wasn't a big deal. That's easy. That was easy. These cars drove so much better than the ones we ran this morning that it made it a lot. I mean, it was a lot more fun to drive these, obviously, just because they handle so good compared to the Sprint Cup cars. But you can't take it away from Dave Rogers and these guys in the Z-Line team today. I mean, they made it handle really, really good. I mean, there were a lot of cars that weren't driving real good out there, and this thing drove good all day. They just did an awesome job.
Well, congratulations, 2 for 2. Can you go undefeated? You got 9 races on this schedule.
I don't know. Maybe I need to go run for the championship or something. I don't know.
Tony Stewart back in victory lane.
And by winning the first 2 races of the season, Tony becoming the 3rd driver in Nationwide Series history to sweep the first 2. And some pretty good company there. Big E, 1986, and Chad Little in 1995. Tony mentioned Dave Rogers, his Nationwide Series crew chief. Rogers will be among the guests on NASCAR Now on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN 2. Let's hear from the guys who called the race out in California today. Dr. Jerry Punch, Andy Petrie, and Dale Jarrett.
Thanks, Alan. After the season opener in Daytona, the NASCAR nationwide teams come 3,000 miles to the West Coast and endure 2 days of rain. And guess what? The results are the same. Tony Stewart once again in victory lane. What a dominating performance today by Tony Stewart and that Joe Gibbs team.
Yeah, he really didn't let anybody get too close, and I'm sure that Tony's going to say it was a lot harder than he made it look, but it was just dominating all day long.
His car didn't look like it really got out of shape much. He'd get that little bit of a lead, and I think he just got just far enough ahead of those guys to make them think that they had something for him, but they didn't have anything for him today.
You know, one of the drivers we thought would contend today was Jeff Burton, who won this race last September, but on lap 49, Burton's Chevrolet goes up and rubs the wall.
And these guys, Pat Smith and his crew, got in here and worked on this car. You see, it's got a lot of damage on the body and the suspension. They made a lot of pit stops, spent a lot of time fixing it, but they fixed it right, started in the back of the pack, and drove the car to the front.
One of the best battles to watch all day was this run for second place, a tug of war between 2 Toyotas.
These guys just could not get separated all day long. They battled. It was a great battle. At the end of the day, Kyle Busch ended up 2nd. David Rudiman ended up 4th, but a great battle all day long.
But no one had anything for Tony Stewart, who led 136 of 150 laps on his way to his 4th career NASCAR Nationwide Series win and his first win ever at this track here in Fontana, California. Tony Stewart makes it 2 in a row here in the NASCAR Nationwide Series.
Thank you, Doctor. 136 of 150 laps he led. And that's only the 2nd most. Can you believe that? That's got to be a record. That's only the 2nd most. Dale Earnhardt Jr. did it a few years back. Thoughts on the nationwide race?
I mean, it was kind of boring. I mean, Tony Stewart just made a mockery of it, but good for him.
It's obvious that that new engine configuration that they have is really fun for these guys. They could stand on it flat pretty much all the way around. With the new spacer, I think it reduced horsepower by some 80 horsepower in the Nationwide Series engines. Yep. They could just stand on it all the way through the corners, real fast through the corners.
You know what's funny about that, though? We heard Dale Earnhardt Jr. say, oh, it's a lot easier to drive this new car configuration. Then we heard Carl Edwards say the exact opposite thing, that, boy, it's a lot more difficult to drive. So I wonder where the truth is in that.
Probably depends how your car's handling that day.
I guess so.
Yeah. One thing we know for sure, Tony Stewart in the Gibbs Toyotas in the Nationwide Series, pretty potent as far as 2008 is concerned. So far, Nationwide Series running in Vegas this coming Saturday. Coming up, back to the garage to hear more about the doubleheader from California on Monday. Not the first time that NASCAR has run both the Cup and Nationwide Series races in the same day, but 12 drivers did the double today. Last time it happened was, of course, last July when 20 drivers ran both races in one 24-hour period. So after their very brief night of rest, what were the people in the garage area out at the track in California talking about before the restart of today's race? Let's bring in our NASCAR insider, Angelique Shengelis, to tell us. I guess topic number one, Angelique, was the decision to go racing last night in the wet track conditions.
Alan, NASCAR said it was absolutely the right decision to try as hard as it could to get the race on last night. I spoke to John Darby extensively, and he said this was really about the fans. They don't know what the situation is with fans. Can they come back on Monday? They were going to keep people here as late as they could, and obviously they did, to try to get the race in. Now, there were several people I did speak to who thought this was a wrong decision, but NASCAR felt like they had to also consider the teams. They have to go to Las Vegas for this weekend's race. They knew that these teams had to get back to Charlotte and make the trip back to the West Coast, so these are all considerations for NASCAR.
Now, that's the decision from NASCAR's perspective. As you wandered around and talked to different teams and team members, what were they talking about?
Well, J.D. Gibbs, the president of Joe Gibbs Racing, said, look, he knew he was biased because Denny Hamlin, one of his drivers, was involved in a wreck yesterday because of the weepers. And he said that he thought NASCAR typically makes the right decisions. This time he didn't think so. And he believed that NASCAR, if they look back at this decision, would have changed their minds and done something differently. But he was really in the minority, Alan. I spoke to several people. Kurt Busch said he really applauded NASCAR for being aggressive on this effort to try to get the race in. And Michael Waltrip said that his peers need to stop whining, that this is not about the drivers. This is about the show and the fans. So quit belly aching. His words.
I like Mikey's attitude there. Let's talk about logistics now. The teams have to exchange equipment, do whatever they have to do to go race in Vegas in just a few days. What are they saying?
This is a very trying time, and I spoke to Roy McCauley, the crew chief of the Daytona 500 winning car last week, and he said, his quote, "This is a mess." And it really, they won't see signs of it immediately. What he thinks is that this will become a cumulative effect, that it'll snowball when it's day after day for these crews. This is really all about the crews. It's not so much about getting the cars to Vegas. They have these things in place. A lot of teams already have their cars on the way in trucks to Vegas. This is about the manpower and how this can make them very weary. And he expects to see some kind of effect probably in a month or so, Alan.
All right, Angelique, we're going to talk more about those logistics coming up in just a couple of minutes. You need to go home, too. Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you, Alan.
We had so many people working so hard out in California to bring you coverage of the weekend's races, and they all only get a day at home before they turn around and head to Vegas as well.
Extra day's brutal.
Yeah, not fun.
Day.
You were talking to some teams on Monday morning by telephone from the studio here while they were getting ready to go to work in California about another hurdle to the logistics.
Indeed, Alan, the Phoenix test. The teams are slated to test at Phoenix International Raceway, and this does put a damper on that. As Angelique said, well, it's hard on these crew guys to get back home, come back out, transverse the country so many times, and lose a day, lose an entire day to prepare cars or be home with their families and rest. It's just really difficult.
Plus these poor truck drivers. I mean, they're in those trucks just burning the oil down.
The test, when you're preparing a car to go test, it's not one of the cars you're going to race. It's something you've set aside and wired up with telemetry, or is that a car that's going to come out of the inventory?
Well, it probably comes out of the inventory. If it's a really good car at the test, they'll probably take it back and race it there.
Yeah, interesting. There's a lot more to this logistics issue that the teams are facing, and we're going to get into that just a little more in just a couple of minutes when we talk with Jimmy Makar from Joe Gibbs Racing about what his team is having to go through to get from the California rainout to Vegas and on to that Phoenix test. And we'll also preview the Vegas race. Kind of pulled around as Kyle Busch went by him, and Marks hits the inside wall early in the race. Good race for the lead. Kyle Busch in the 51, Todd Bodine in the 30. Want to guess who's going to win out on that one?
Rowdy.
Yeah, exactly. Not so fast, as Todd would fight with him pretty well, but it would be Kyle Busch regaining the lead with 51 laps to go. Regaining the lead and leading 51 laps. I can't.
Man, it's all good. That boy can wheel it.
Boy, he can.
He is a wheel man. I tell you what, I love his attitude. He's, you know, somebody asked him, why do you race all of these different races? He says, man, I'd be watching it on TV anyway. May as well be out there wheeling one.
He drives every race like it's the last time he's ever going to get it.
I love to watch him race. He's awesome.
Kyle, the first driver to lead the Sprint Cup Series and Craftsman Truck Series standings at the same time. He is out in front after 2 races this season for the Craftsman Truck Series. I want to talk more about the logistics of having races on Monday out on the West Coast, followed by another set of races in Las Vegas, where teams have to be in town on Thursday to set up. For that, we bring in from the Joe Gibbs Racing Shops in Huntersville, North Carolina, Jimmy Makar, Vice President of Joe Gibbs Racing. Jimmy's the man in charge of overseeing pretty much everything that goes on there competition-wise. Jimmy, thanks for taking a couple minutes for me.
Good to be here, Alan.
Let's talk logistics. Your teams race in Fontana, California on Monday. They have to be back in Las Vegas basically late on Thursday. How does it work from a car point of view? Do you send trucks out to meet other trucks? Are they coming all the way back home? Give us an idea of how it all is going to work logistically.
Yeah, that's a pretty hard thing. We've been working on it for a couple of weeks now, trying to get logistics down, and have had a few wrenches thrown in on us. One of our own making, we had a few issues here getting cars ready to go out, and we're about a day and a half late leaving. They actually had to leave Saturday afternoon, and we were scheduled to leave Friday morning, so we got out there a little late. But the plan all along was to take the 3 Vegas cars in a truck out to California. NASCAR was going to have an area for the teams to park those trucks, which would have been the Busch garage had they, or the Nationwide garage had they run that race. But unfortunately, they haven't run, so they're using the truck parking area for those trucks to stage. And as we speak right now, our team, and I'm sure many teams, are out there right now taking parts and pieces off of the race cars that they need for Las Vegas, and getting the cars off of our test trucks and putting them on their trucks so that they can leave straight from California and go on to Vegas. And the cars they race today will go back on that test truck. Ours can haul 4 cars, so those 3 Joe Gibbs cars will go on that test truck, and they'll come back across country and bring those cars back here and get them try to get them ready for the next event they'll be running at, which for most of them will be Atlanta.
And Jimmy, as far as the people are concerned, not having the people in the shop on this Monday, I know it won't set you back much for Vegas because those cars are already out in California, but does it affect you in races going forward, losing that day in the shop?
Not a lot. Our shop is set up in a way that those guys that are out there in California right now really wouldn't have been back here in the shop any more than a few hours. By the time they flew all night and got a little rest and got back in the shop here, they might have had a few hours. So really the cars are being prepared by all the guys in the shop. We don't depend on the road guys to get back here and get cars ready. So we really haven't lost a whole lot by not having them back on Monday.
And last question, and I need kind of a quick answer, Jimmy. When you look at your budgets for a season, do you plan on a couple of rainouts?
We build some money in for things like that, yes. Not necessarily rainouts, but all kinds of little odd things that we don't plan on, that we put a little money aside to take care of those items, yes.
Jimmy, appreciate you taking time for us, and we'll see you at the racetrack very shortly.
Okay, Alan. Be in Vegas. See you there.
Jimmy Magar from Joe Gibbs Racing. Thank you to Jimmy. That's the big team, or one of the big teams. Gibbs and Hendrick and Roush Fenway and Ganassi and so on. I'm thinking about the Nationwide Series teams now that got done out in Fontana late on Monday afternoon Pacific time and have to be back in Vegas in a couple days to check in and tech inspect. This is going to be difficult on those teams.
Very. I mean, very, and it's already hard enough for the Nationwide Series teams that aren't Cup affiliated in the first place. They are fighting an uphill battle every single day of their racing lives, and this certainly doesn't help anything. It is a very difficult transition to get these cars to the next racetrack for sure.
You know, as you and I were talking earlier today, Rusty Wallace and I were chatting some when the race got rained out on Saturday about what his team's plans were, and before this even came up, his teams were planning to go straight from California to Vegas, work in Brendan Gaughan's shop, the shop that he ran his Craftsman truck operation out of for a while, and just prep their cars there for the Vegas weekend.
And they'll probably still do that, just be working around the clock.
Yeah.
A lot of hours for those crew guys.
Yeah, a short week there, and hopefully they get some time to enjoy Vegas just a little bit. So that's the quick turnaround from the rain out and the late on Monday run to the Thursday check-in at Vegas. Coming up, a last look at what happened in California and a look ahead at Las Vegas.
Jimmy Johnson pulling off the trifecta, 3 in a row at Vegas.
Did you say 3-peat?
The Lowe Chevrolet will win for the 3rd straight time. His 3rd Las Vegas victory in a row.
It is a Vegas weekend for NASCAR's Top Series. Our coverage of the NASCAR Nationwide Series begins Saturday at 4 Eastern on ESPN2. And we will start with NASCAR Countdown, then get you into all the action of the race. That is Saturday from Vegas. Hope you'll be with us. And we preview the weekend ahead now a little bit with Boris and Marty. First thing I think of when I think of Vegas, besides the casinos, was the great finish to the Nationwide Series race there last year. Remember Jeff Burton and Kyle Busch coming off the last corner, racing for the checkered flag, 1-1, and one crashed. In fact, here it is. Spectacular.
How about you, Nostradamus?
I kind of know what's coming ahead. That's what I hold all these papers here for, Marty. A great race, a great racing at the finish. However, during the race at Vegas last year, the yellow flag waved a lot. Newly reconfigured track, newly paved. We had a dozen cautions in the Nationwide Series race last year, 9 in the Cup race last year, which was longer, by the way, the Cup race. Over-under on cautions this year. Over 12, under 12 in the Saturday race.
I vote for under. I think the track's coming in. The second crew is going to work in. I think we'll be better this year.
I'll go over just to say the other thing.
Just go the other way.
Over works for me.
What did we learn from the Cup Series and Nationwide Series tests out in Vegas last month that got our attention? Anything? Any one?
I think it's going to be a great race. I do. I think it's going to be a really good race. As Boris said, that racetrack's coming in. I think that the race in Fontana really showed that the car of tomorrow, or the new car, can be racy. So I think it's going to be good next week.
And the battle for the top 35 in owners' points. There's only 3 races left to see who gets in that, so it's all important.
Got to be huge to see that these guys don't have a bad finish. So Jimmy Johnson trying to keep his role going in Vegas. And again, that Nationwide Series race on Saturday. See if it is, in fact, a wide open lap around the racetrack for the Nationwide Series cars. And, of course, next Monday night, we will be here, 5:30 Eastern Time, with the hour-long edition of NASCAR Now to roundtable it up for you. And don't forget, 6 o'clock Eastern throughout the rest of the week, NASCAR Now to keep you posted on the latest that's happening in racing. We'll look for you over the weekend from Vegas. See ya.
Another checkered flag is going to fly for the 51 with Kyle Busch behind the wheel, winning the San Bernardino County 200.
Dadgum, good job right there, boys.
We got spread out and they had the opportunity if we'd let them get 5 points. Now.
Oh, that impressive rookie Brian Clausen. Hard impact here with the front of his Dodge. Tony Stewart will win back-to-back in NASCAR Nationwide competition.
Whoa, look out! Out of control is Casey Mears. Skirts the outside wall, spins down, collects Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Caution flag is waving once again. This time it's for rain. Finally, after a long, wet, dreary weekend, it's finally going to break loose here today. The Auto Club 500. Bringing his Ford Fusion across the stripe. Carl Edwards gets the victory.
NASCAR is back.